Welcome back to another instant reaction edition of the Night Report podcast. Richie, we've got a couple new coaching staff changes to discuss on the program today. New receivers coach Damiere Shaw, who was previously on the staff, but as I believe, some kind of off the field role, like director of player personnel or something like that. Not necessarily that role, and the new hire from outside the program, former James Madison defensive coordinator Corey Hetherman. Richie, talk to us a little bit about how Damiere Shaw came to the staff full time.
For director of player development. No, personnel.
Player development.
One of them. I don't remember either. Shit. Whatever. Off to a hot start. He's been on the staff for 2 years. He has a ton of connections to Fran Brown, obviously secondary coach. They coached together at Temple. Philly guy, coached together at Baylor as well. Apparently, I was talking to Temple guys yesterday about him. Matt Rule was super, super high on him, like wanted to promote him to a full-time assistant coach back during his Baylor days, but just didn't have a spot at the moment. He was a little younger back then too, so he's still kind of learning, but he was very close to getting another assistant coaching role before heading over to Fordham, where he was the wide receivers coach in 2019, the season before Shiano took over. Everything we've been told was he was going to be the CB's coach, the cornerbacks coach. He's telling high school coaches that too, like, to the point where he was basically on staff. He was kind of filling in that 10th role. And then it sounded like he was going to take over and just instead they obviously had an open position at wide receivers. And they're like, all right, Shaw, you coached wide receivers last year. Why don't you go do that instead? Like you can do that. You've done it everywhere you've been, except here where you were going to be cornerbacks with Fran. But regardless, good hire, very young kid. I think he's younger than me actually. Or he's around my age.
So he's a high school grad of 2012. There's an interesting connection here. So he went to Cardinal O'Hara High School. He was a freshman on the football team when Tom Savage was a senior quarterback there. So he was a receiver and a cornerback there. He originally signed at a high school to go to Temple. He got injured and ended up not playing football at Temple, but I guess he was under Rule still. He was probably a GA or something like that, or a student assistant. So he does have a very close relationship with Rule. I think he followed him to Baylor as well when he was there. He's worked with a lot of receivers as like an assistant wide receiver / student assistant.
Whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, whatever you want to call it. He worked with like Robbie Anderson, Keith Kirkwood, Denzel Mims. Like he's assisted to get some guys in the NFL, which is a pretty good feather in his cap. So this is a guy, I feel like if you saw the video of him getting introduced by Shiano, like clearly a lot of the players love him. Like he's really close with Fran. Like Fran was like, you could just tell he was just beaming in that video. So I think this will also help keep Fran happy at Rutgers too. Not that, we were going to lose him necessarily right away, but I think anything that can help keep him on campus as long as possible is a big plus.
Yeah, no, I got a couple funny DMs actually when I tweeted out the Robbie Anderson, Denzel Mims, and all that stuff. First one was like, I'm just reading it again now. It's like one former Jets receiver, one soon-to-be former Jets receiver. Another one was like, wow, he coached 2 guys who couldn't run routes. If you showed it to them on a map, how do you call that a solid hire when these are the guys he's worked with? It's like, ouch. Like, you know what? They made the league. They had some good couple games, I guess, here and there, whether it be college or even with the Jets maybe at times. But mind you, it's the Jets. Come on, like.
Yeah, like guys, they made it to the NFL. Like that says a ton about where their development went. Like you don't get to the NFL without solid development in college unless you're like this, Dorial Green Beckham type where you're just like a freak and you saw how quickly a guy can burn out when they're not, working on their craft. Yeah. So, I mean, Robbie Anderson, undrafted guy at a Temple, and he's entering his like 7th year in the league. So clearly he's got some kind of development that happened in college.
Yeah, actually, as we're recording this, Dewan Samuels, the 2023 DN edge target, just actually quote tweeted it and said, "My dog, man, congrats, Coach Shaw," with like the 100 emoji and all that. So I mean, he's got like he's close with some of these kids already. So I think he's going to pay off in the big time in terms of recruiting. I think he's going to connect with these kids, and I think you're going to see him maybe not have as much of an impact as Fran does in South Jersey, but I do think you'll see him have a pretty good impact in terms of maybe the Big North and especially the Philly area. Like Greg said yesterday when we were talking to him, their GPS actually stopped working in Philadelphia, and Shaw was just kind of like, "Go there, go left, go right," and it's like, all right, like, this guy knows what he's talking about. Like, this guy knows the Philly area. So he's from down there, coached down there at Temple. I think this is actually a pretty solid hire. Now he's got big shoes to fill. Like, Tyquan Underwood was no slouch in terms of recruiting, especially the Florida area where they're still in it technically for a couple 4-star receivers and Bryson Rogers, Santana Fleming, Hakeem Williams. He's going to have to fill those shoes pretty quickly. I don't know how it's going to happen, if they're going to be able to win any of those 3 receivers, but I do think he'll get some pretty good recruits in year 1, especially.
For sure. And Gianno, honestly, he wouldn't hire this guy unless he fully believed in his capabilities as a coach. Like, he has the clout to go out and get high level coaches. So if he's a guy that Gianno wanted for the role, I'm all for it. And I think the hesitation was, like you were saying, like, there was a lot of guys who on the staff could get moved. And we've kind of seen that with some of the hires. And I think he was just kind of exploring all avenues before he made a final decision. So speaking of exploring all avenues, we got another coach that we want to talk about here, Corey Hetherman. He's from James Madison. He's been the DC and D-line coach there for the last 3 years. They've had top 10 defenses in the FCS each of the last 3 years. He won the 2021 FCS Assistant Coach of the Year. This one seems like a great hire, Richie.
Yeah, no, 100%. It's interesting just looking at like a plus 17 turnover margin as a DC. Only gave up 250 yards of offense last year per game. Like you just said, FCS Assistant Coach of the Year, which is like the Royals Award, same thing for FCS. Connections to Harris Simiak, who's a new DC. This is a pretty damn good hire. I don't really see anything wrong with it at all. Like, if you look back at every stint he's been at, or every coaching stop that he's been at, has been pretty successful, whether that be Maine under Harris Simiak as head coach. Now Harris Simiak's the DC, and he's going to be linebacker coach. The only thing I kind of question there is he's never coached linebackers before. He's like a DN's coach everywhere he goes, or DC, or defensive line coach in general. So there's a little bit of a question mark there in terms of linebackers, but he did have a pretty damn good linebacker there this year in who was his name? Kelvin Azanama, 3rd-team all-conference linebacker, had like 100 and something tackles.
Yeah, he also that Demonte Tucker Dorsey dude.
Yes, and he was like one of the high. I think they're highest graded, right? PFF.
Yeah, he was their highest defensive graded player in PFF. He was the 13th ranked linebacker. He had an 89.7 grade overall.
Yeah, I mean, seems like a pretty good hire in general. I'm intrigued to see what they do with Bob Frazier, whether he goes to an off the field role and they hire another assistant coach, which is very possible. But I tend to think that that Frazier is going to be involved somehow. And I do think he might still be a 10th assistant, or whatever you want to call him. Maybe not linebackers. I was looking back at his resume today, or his coaching, I don't even know what you call it, coaching experience, I guess. And he has coached, I don't think he's ever coached anything other than linebackers before, but he has been an offensive line coach and tight ends coach, which was kind of interesting to me. Because it does seem like there's going to be some shuffling going around. Is it possible Nuns goes back to running backs? You put Frazier at tight end / special teams, like most special teams coordinators do anyway, and then go with Augie and Ulrich as 2 O-line coaches? It's possible. I mean, it's not crazy, because we have heard Augie been talked about quite a bit with offensive linemen, whether it be the transfer portal, Willie Tyler, who mentioned him. A couple others have mentioned him over the past couple weeks. I think Jason Stone actually mentioned him too, the new 2023 commit.
Yep.
So it is intriguing, because he's only coached Frazier's only coached three positions ever. And you have an open special teams role. So now just kind of I'm filling in the dots here. I'm just kind of mixing and matching. Well, Greg said he also moving stuff.
It also kind of creates the speculation that maybe Frazier gets moved to like a role similar to Joe Susan, where he's still coaching, but he's like an analyst or some kind of like special assistant to the head coach. And that opens up another recruiting role, because I mean, we still don't have a special teams coordinator. There's been speculation that we're not going to get a full-time special teams coordinator. So currently there's 5 offensive assistants, 4 defensive assistants. So if we do hire somebody else, it probably is going to be a defensive assistant, because right now we've only got Harris Simiak, we've got Heatherman, we've got Watson, we've got Fran. So
yeah, it's interesting. And like, I know a lot of people on the boards keep saying, they're like, oh, Bob Frazier's not a good recruiter. He's useless on the road. Why are we putting him there? And it's like, yeah, he's also the same guy that landed you, like Quentin Gauze, like Logan Ryan, Steve Harness, Trevor Morris, Kamal Seymour. There's a bunch of names. He usually plays a pretty big role in terms of recruiting Canadian kids as well, whether that be Wesley Bailey, Renee Conga. I'm just naming them off the top of my head, so I can't think of any others right now. But I think he even played a role in Jamal Westerman, if I recall correctly.
Doesn't he have a Canadian connection in general?
He does.
The guy.
He's one of the trainers up there, one of the academies or whatever they are up there. But yeah, so let's not act like he's like the worst person in the world. Like he also played a pretty big role in recruiting Austin Dean, who I do think actually is probably going to see some time this year just because they're zero depth there, but that's a different story. Yeah, I mean, I think Frazier still stays on. In what capacity to be determined, but like Greg said yesterday, they are going to switch some things around. He said you got to put everyone on the bus he was referencing, and then you got to switch the seats on the bus. And I'm like,
yeah,
where are we going with this one?
An interesting analogy there.
Bizarre one. I think I could have used a couple other like different analogies, but whatever. I'm not knocking you, Greg. I'm just saying. But yeah, I mean, two good hires. I don't see anything wrong with either of them. I don't know if you can consider Shaw an upgrade. Like I said before, he's still got some big shoes to fill. In terms of Hetherman, I'd say it's arguably an upgrade, but it's hard to say upgrade when Frazier still might be on staff. So it's like,
yeah, and just to kind of like highlight a little bit more that so Hetherman didn't really have a connection to Rutgers, nor did he have a connection to New Jersey outside of being very close with Harris-Simiak. So Harris-Simiak played football at Springfield College, and he met Hetherman when Hetherman was a GA there. They both GA'd the following season as well at Springfield. So they spent 2 years at Springfield together. And then when Harris-Simiak got the job at Maine, he hired Hetherman to come on to his staff. So he was an assistant there for 4 years at Maine as well. And then he went to JMU right after Harris-Simiak left Maine to go to Minnesota. So they know each other very, very well. This has the feel of it seemed like Shiano kind of gave Gleason the ability to choose one of his assistants as the OC. This one feels like he gave Harris-Simiak the ability to kind of influence one of his assistants as a DC. Mm-hmm. But I mean, everything I'm seeing about this guy sounds like he's a fantastic coach. He's originally from Oxford, Massachusetts, which is, if you're not familiar with the state of Massachusetts, it's right outside of Worcester, whatever you want to call it.
Sure.
When he was at Maine, his primary recruiting area was South Jersey. So it sounds like he's recruited the area before. But this one's a bit more of an enigma in terms of his background because he doesn't have a strong Rutgers connection outside of Harris-Simiak.
And interestingly enough, I didn't even mention it on here. I know I texted you about it. 2019 FCS defensive player of the year. Sorry, offense was Trey Lance. Defensive player of the year was Rondell Carter, Rutgers transfer.
Yep.
Who they kind of pushed out. Kind of stupid, it looks like now, because he's with the Texans. But yeah, he coached them to arguably the best player in FCS college football. So it's like the guy knows talent.
Yeah.
But besides the point, I'm always one little dig at Ash in every pod.
That was tough because I remember he was only here for a year.
Rondell Carter. Fucking tight ends.
Well, I remember him getting a lot of hype in the preseason or in like spring, like the spring and the summer. And it's like, man, Carter, I mean, he's not going to play this year, but he looks really good because he was a guy we got out of like Baltimore or something like that. Like he was
Baltimore, Virginia. I forget. It was somewhere in that area.
Yeah. But he was like a guy who was pretty under recruited. And then he was just a force in practice. So
yeah, it's crazy how he went from like tied for third in JMU's single season history for sacks, named all first team all CAA, then FCS defensive player of the year, and a first team All American. And it's like, all right, what happened here? Like you messed up somewhere, Ash. But
yep,
we say that quite a bit though over here.
Yep, just imagine what the team could have been looking like a couple of years, or I guess even last year, with Rondell Carter, with Kenny Pickett, with blah, 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 blah.
Kenny Pickett, Rondell Carter, and Tom Flacco, but we'll ignore that one.
Dude, if you think about it, thinking back to like the guys who ended up not being here, who either like we could have had or had committed at one point. I remember like going through it with one of my buddies once. It was like Saquon, Jonathan Taylor, David Njoku, like so many like high end NFL players that we could have had if not for just ineptitude.
It's every single year. You just look more and more at it, and it's just like it stings because like a bunch of my buddies, we'll talk about it too, because they're not Rutgers fans. They don't even watch college football ever. But they'll watch the NFL and they'll be like, holy shit, look at this guy. Like, imagine if he went to Rutgers. I'm like, yeah, he was committed at one point, actually, if you really want to know. Yeah. Oh, him? Yeah. I was like, yeah, he was committed too. Oh, him? Yeah, I know him too.
It'd be interesting if somebody did like an alternate, like a butterfly effect of like what happens if Shiano doesn't leave in 2011, like what the program could look like in the following like 5 to 10 years. Because
wild. Between
the recruits that we missed out on to almost immediately Penn State having that scandal hit them, so they were down. There was just like such an opportunity there. We got the Big Ten invite. Like there was just everything converged to help Rutgers, and we blew it.
The timing was there, and there's just nothing can be said. And it fell apart. Obviously, he left. Flood did his best to keep it afloat, which I actually don't think Flood did as much damage as people say. I think it's more of like, instead of hiring someone else after him that was like equal or higher, they went like dumpster fire times 3.
Yep. Yeah.
But yeah, no, not good at all. But yeah, no, solid hires though. So we'll see what happens this year. The only thing, like I said, the only thing I'm concerned about is he has never coached linebackers before. I guess like you can consider an edge like a defensive lineman at this point. I guess it is technically also probably before 2.5 last year a lot under Smith. Will it be the same? I don't think you have a choice really because you don't have many linebackers to begin with.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting to see what kind of role he tends to play. But he's obviously very knowledgeable with defenses in general. He's been successful at Maine, been successful at what the hell? James Madison. I can't even think of the name. Is he more successful than? Is he the reason Harris Simiak is at where he is? Debatable.
We'll find out. Interestingly enough, in college, he went to Fitchburg State. Played quarterback there. He was a quarterback for 3 years. Yeah, pretty good one too. He led them to 2 conference championships. He went 21-11 as the starter. Pretty good. He's captain.
Top 35 under 35 coach by the AFCA, which also is the one that ranked him. What do you call it? The FCS coach of the assistant coach of the year.
Yep.
That's interesting because I think the top 35 under 35 is not just FBS. I think that's everybody.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, because like I think Brian Hartline won it last year, the year before, whatever it was, or it was one.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, no, that is every coach, and he ended up getting it, which is interesting because they go all levels of college football in general. It's not just FBS, FCS. It's like even lower, I think, because I've never heard of Wheaton College before in my life, and that's on there.
Yeah, I haven't either. But it's interesting too because if you watch interviews with Hetherman, that dude is intense. Like he is a guy that probably jives pretty well personality wise with Shiano, and Shiano is going to be a guy who is going to be able to get these like up and coming coaches that want a big break and are willing to work, and he can kind of chew out a little bit. And I think that's the reason why there's a youth movement in his staff, because when you're green, you take, I mean, I think that's kind of why he wants high school kids too, because you can mold those guys, you can mold the coaches, you can mold the players to kind of fit what you think they should be as players and coaches. So
actually, there might be a new hire.
Really? Are we breaking news here?
Not breaking news, but there might be like technically not a new name yet, but it does. It sounds like Frazier might be off the field. So there is a new role somewhere. So maybe my article I was writing as someone's getting hired, Hetherman over here, maybe it might be worth salvaging after all. I was trying to put together something just quick, and I was like, you know what? since we don't know what position Greg's going to hire, I was just going to name like why they could hire a QB coach, why they could hire a running back coach, and then just name like 3 candidates, that potential candidates or whatever. And there is some interesting names. I know you mentioned Huggins before. Steve Shimko, someone mentioned on the boards up at Boston College right now. Rutgers guy under Shiano. I don't know where he would fit because, man, I mean, maybe they do need a tight ends coach because maybe Nuns moves and maybe Frazier's off the field and now they don't have a tight ends coach. And it's like, although I don't know. There's so many interesting moves you could do. And maybe you just want a recruiter. And if you want a recruiter, that's kind of what that tight ends role is for. So maybe let Nuns go coach running backs, let Augie coach. What was Augie, a tackle or a guard? I can't remember.
I thought he was a guard.
Maybe he'll
guard for the Saints.
Interior offensive line, and Aldrich coaches offensive line, or I don't know. You can mix and match so many things. It doesn't seem like anyone else is leaving, so to speak, but it does sound like Frazier would be is going to be off the field, and then I don't know. We mix and match just about everybody at that point.
So I know a lot. Yeah, I'm thinking to myself now. Shiano, I think, has more players become coaches than most programs. Like if you look, like there's just a lot of guys in the Northeast who are coaching high level college football right now who were players under Shiano. Mm-hmm. And I mean, every program has players that become coaches, but it seems like, back from we were kids, like I can think of like, at least a dozen players that I watch play at Rutgers who are now coaches somewhere. So it's almost like he's developing his own pipeline too.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I'm trying to remember because I was looking up like former Rutgers guys. Did Matt Simon play for Rutgers? Or did he just
No, I think he just coached.
Just coached. All right, never mind. That defeats my whole narrative that I was going with right now, but forget that.
I think he was like flex guy, wasn't he?
He might have been. I forget what he was, but I was going to go somewhere with that, but forget that one now, obviously. I think he's at Minnesota now, actually.
He is. So I believe they played together at Northern Illinois.
God, that makes a lot more sense. He's actually a Minnesota native. I never knew that. Besides the point, yeah. So I mean, it's interesting. I don't know where they're going to fill this 10th role. You can kind of, like Shiano said before, they're going to mix and match guys. I don't know what the hell is going to go on with that offense. I do think you're going to see something get announced within the next week. I think I said by the weekend to you the other day. Mm-hmm. Sounded like they're going to just announce it. I think you're going to be like, oh shit, oh my God, Augie's O-line coach. Like, oh, weird. I heard that on this podcast. Like, hey. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know what they're going to do. Nuns is staying somewhere. I don't know where. Whether it's tight ends, wide receivers, running backs. I think for wide receivers is technically the only one he hasn't coached yet for Rutgers.
Yep.
He's been OC before at this point. He's been head coach, which was wild. So maybe, hey, you know what? Fuck it. Put him at wide receivers. I can't put him at wide receivers. I'm an idiot. No. Damiere Shaw. I don't know what the fuck's going to happen over there. That's going to be a whole switcheroo thing. In terms of 10th assistant,
have to be defense.
Huggins, right? I'd have to be defense. Damaso Munoz, could he get promoted? But do you want another? What is he? DB? He was a DB, right? Linebacker.
He's linebacker.
An outside linebackers coach. I don't know. You want another DB's coach, really? In reality, when you have Fran, you have Harris Simiak, who was a safeties coach and probably specializes there. Shiano, DB's coach, like. I don't know. Marquise Watson's a little young. Do you give him like a D tackles coach and kind of be like, or DNs coach and be like, Watson was a D tackle in college. Hey, Westerman, you want to go coach Ds and you're pretty young, you're up and coming. You kind of filled in when it was a mix between him and who was the other guy? Noonan or Valone? Noonan. I think Valone's on offense now.
Yeah, Valone, even though he played D-line here, he's the assistant offensive line coach.
Yeah, so maybe you go Watson and Westerman and just rock with like all these young guys and kind of hope that they can recruit. I mean, Westerman filled in, like I said before, or Noonan. Noonan was pretty good too, and he seems to have a pretty prominent role in the program regardless. When Panagos wasn't there for bowl practices and stuff, it seemed like he kind of stepped up and filled that role as well. And then he filled it the entire year Panagos missed, so. I don't know. I think obviously they'll get interviews. Now it's going to be tough if someone else like shows interest, like a Hetherman type. It's like, all right, how do you say no? Like, we'll find a role for you somewhere.
Yeah, I think Shiano is intentionally kind of being open-minded with this because you want to just hire the best coach you can and figure out where they fit in next. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you're maxed out at offense at this point. Like if you can find the right guy to be your special teams coordinator who's like a stud recruiter, blah, 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 like maybe you hire that. But if you find a guy whose specialty is DBs, you make Fran the DB coach and the new guy the CBs coach. Like you make it work.
Yeah, but 100%. It is interesting. The staff is just completely new, and I don't think I would have guessed any. Every scenario I went through my head, I don't think I ever saw like them hiring like 2 very, very young coaches like this. And it's pretty crazy. But I mean, you got guys to promote within possibly. You got potential Jersey guys, I'm sure, around the country. I'm going to try to put together that list of whether it be Huggins or Munoz or whoever, and we're going to try to put together something on the boards. I will have something with James Madison writer. Yes, they have beat writers. Never knew that. Wow, they have a Rivals website.
They're like the closest thing to an SEC school in the FCS that you can get. They have like, I know a few friends who went to JMU, like their football tailgating scene and there's is just like insane.
Really?
Yeah, it's a fun school. They have a pretty big stadium for the FCS. Like, I want to say it's like 30,000 plus.
Yeah, we're talking about FCS, by the way. They are Sunbelt 2022, baby.
Oh, really? Did they make the jump?
FBS. So he got out. He's like, fuck that. I'm not doing that. And I just lost like all my seniors. I'm done. Count me out.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah. Oh, actually. Oh, wow. They announced Kurt Signetti announced it today. That's the other thing we didn't mention. So Shiano, I guess, kind of knows or got a little insight, I'm sure, about this guy beforehand, because Kurt Signetti, brother of Frank Signetti, who's OC at Pitt, who stole Underwood, who now Rutgers is now stealing Kurt Signetti's coach, and everyone's got these conspiracy theories that it's like, fuck you, Signetti, fuck this other Signetti, fuck your family. Like, oh, geez, it's wild. But yeah, interesting. So I'm sure he probably reached out to, whether it be reaching out to even Frank himself. I could see them still talking every once in a while. And I could see him saying like, all right, like, hey, what's the deal with this dude down here? I know he wants to go to FBS, blah, blah, blah. He interviewed, he applied, all that, whatever. So, yeah, I mean, he definitely did his homework.
He did. But we're running a bit long. Richie, you got any final word for the fans before we sign off?
Let's see. Anything good? Talked to Antoine Woolfolk's high school coach yesterday. He was dinged up a little bit. He did play yesterday. They did beat Mikey Williams' team.
Really?
But he barely played because he missed the past 3 games with an ankle injury, but he is back. But side note, before that game, he's averaging 13 rebounds a game. So all you knocking him for being a center at Rutgers, he will be decent if they don't lose everyone to the portal.
Oh, this will be Pike's true like test. The biggest test he's probably had since he's been to Rutgers is how do you adjust and use the portal when you like to develop your guys? Because if we don't go heavy on the portal, we're screwed.
This is the year you lie to guys. I know he doesn't. He says he doesn't lie to them, but you just tell them whatever they want to hear just to get them here, and then you figure it out. But yeah, that's all I got.
All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in. This has been another instant reaction edition of the Night Report podcast. We are signing off.